Hi, my adventures with Jesus Tribe. This week, we're going to be talking about the power of testimony, the power of telling stories about the goodness of God. This week, my mom in law passed away. And so we've been going through a lot of thinking and remembering and talking to God about her life and what happened during her life. Just going over things together, crying, grieving, remembering, laughing. It's been beautiful. And through this process, God's really highlighted to us that verse in Revelations where he says, "And we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony." There's something beautiful about remembering the legacy of somebody's life. Frances' mom was a woman of great faith. She had an up and down life. There were lots of things that happened to her that didn't seem fair, that weren't nice. She found Jesus a little later in life and absolutely held on to him for decades, and certainly for all the time that I've known her, over 25 years. And she used to tell us stories of the goodness of God. She'd tell us stories about bringing the boys up and praying in groceries when their cupboards were bare. And these four little boys and her would pray, and they'd come home from school and find bags of groceries outside their front door or on the table, cooked food on the table in their house. She had tons of stories of the goodness of God in the midst of the hardship and what adventures with Jesus looked like for her and her family growing up. God would tell her things like when her boys were in danger, he would tell her, and then she'd have the opportunity to be able to pray and intercede for them so that they'd be saved. It was just a life full of stories of how she did these, how her and the boys did these adventures with Jesus. And as we sat and remembered them, as we sat and remembered these stories, and then remembered how she would preach to us, I'd phone her and she'd start off complaining about something, and then it would turn into telling me what was in the Word of God, which is so beautiful because she would actually preach herself happy and me happy at the same time. And as I was remembering her this week, just being so thankful to God for the stories of how her and the boys grew up, the stories of how she partnered with Jesus, and then her solid standing on the word of God. She knew the word because she read it, she lived it, she went and found out what it had to say about her situation, and when she found verses and scriptures that applied to their situation, she'd hold on to them and she'd tell them back to God, and she'd say, "God, you promised, God, you said, this is what you said." And she forged this partnership with God that saw the things that she prayed come to pass on the earth. It was the most astounding testimony of her life. It didn't mean that everything always went well. In fact, there were times when things really didn't look good at all. Times of desperation, times of sadness, times of fear. But always, 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 whether it was in her own strength of being able to remember the word and pray, or whether it was in phoning us or speaking to friends or family or people that did life with her, that encouraged her in the Lord, she'd walk through these adventures by using these 2 points in Revelation, that it's the overcome by the blood of the Lamb, the word, the promises that God has in the word, and then the power of our testimony, the stories that she would tell of the goodness of God. So this week, that's not only an example of what happened in her life, but it's what has happened and been happening in our life too, is how we have just been remembering the stories of what she said, and then telling God our own promises and our own dreams, and saying thank you so much to him for having the privilege of being able to walk through life with her. And as we've cried because we'll miss her, as we've remembered with smiles at the silly things she found funny and how she had such an infectious laugh, as we've gone through all of these emotions, we've stood on the word. We've overcome, we've gone through this grief, and will remember forever the legacy she has left us and our family of standing firm on the word of God and telling the stories of his goodness. Those were two overarching factors that no matter what she was going through, those were the things that brought her through. So I want to encourage you this week that is the way you overcome, that we overcome any situation in our lives. Whatever is happening to you, whether you don't have enough money to pay bills, or whether there's a family member that you're worried about, or circumstances in your life that you don't know how to fix, the way we overcome is by taking the promises of God, getting them deep internal into ourselves so that we know what he says, and then reminding God about them, talking through scriptures with God, and then remembering the stories of his goodness, both our own stories as well as what we hear from other people. And there's something beautiful that happens when you can stand on a promise of God and you can stand on a story of God and you can say, God, you are just so good. It is absolutely in your nature to look after us and to make sure that everything works out for our good because you love us and we're called according to your purpose. And it is an absolute pleasure and privilege to do life with you as a result. So I bless you guys to know that God is with you, He's for you, He's on His side, and He's given us the tools that are necessary and needed to do everyday adventures with Jesus. So that's my invitation to you, and God's invitation to us is, will you go on adventures with Jesus this week and see what He does? What a privilege. We love you guys. Blessings to you. Can't wait to hear your stories. Have an amazing week adventuring with your Jesus.